All right, welcome to this week's episode of the Vets in Real Estate Podcast. I am joined by a farm and ranch broker, which will be the first time we've had one of those on the show. And so I'm excited to hear about Casey and his journey from the Marine Corps into life as a farm and ranch agent. All right, Casey. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your service and the time that you're willing to spend with us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us about what you did inside the Marines.
Oh, I had a little bit of a different background in the Marine Corps than a traditional Marine. I started out at 511, 5th Battalion, 11th Marines in California, an artillery unit and battalion supply. So basically purchasing, contracting things for artillery unit. And spent 4 years in California at Camp Pendleton. And then I had the opportunity to go to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs as a full-time athlete for the Marine Corps, attempting to go to the Olympics. And so I spent 3 years in Colorado Springs, training, competing, and do some competitions and things like that. A couple of injuries and life changes, and I actually exited the Marine Corps for 3 years. So at 7 years, I got out of the Marine Corps, pursued opportunity in commercial insurance for health clubs specifically. So property and casualty for fitness centers, and it was a great experience, learning experience. And then that changed again after 3 years, and I decided to go back in the Marine Corps and had an opportunity to go in through the reserves and then eventually augment back over to the active duty side. So I was in Colorado, Front Range, Colorado for about 7 years. And then I was transferred to upstate New York, Syracuse, New York for 3 years, and primarily was there for the MEPS, the processing center for enlisting into the military or the Marine Corps. And so I did a lot of screening interviews and things like that and quality control. And then I was transferred my last 2 years in the Marine Corps. I spent in New York City at officer selection assistant. So I was a gunnery sergeant at that time, and worked for a captain in Manhattan. And we basically seek and find qualified college students or post-college students, graduates for the officer selection. And then I retired in 2017. So,
and that is definitely not your typical career.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Yeah, so you were in recruiting, but not truly recruiting, I guess, until that last stint where you're looking for the officer side.
I was recruiting for about 7 years. I was a recruiter and then staff in SUIC, running recruiting offices in Parker, which is southeast of Denver, North Denver, and then Boulder area. So I was on the street with recruiters. You typically had about 5 recruiters at one time. And then the officer selection was a big change. So.
Yeah, at least what I've heard from other Marine Corps recruiters said it's easy to go out there because you either want to be a Marine or you don't want to be a Marine, and you just walk around in uniform, and that does all the work. You don't have to actually do anything else but just look pretty, and you know those people that want to join, right?
That is such a lie.
So I can automatically assume that the sales role in what you do, coming from recruiting, getting somebody to sign their line or sign their life away on the dotted line, and selling real estate, obviously different, but a lot of parallels there. Was it kind of that recruiting background that kind of pushed you into maybe thinking something in sales and you fell into real estate, or how did that transition go?
So when I retired, I did not want to sit in a cubicle, see an office, have multiple cell phones, have a laptop. I wanted to be completely detached from that because I was burned out from talking to everybody, hearing their problems, and trying to figure out how to help them. Kind of just pulled back from that. And actually, I went into community college. We moved to a small property on my grandparents' land, and I wanted to get into some small ag, hobby farm type things. And enjoyed that, and actually just took some horticulture classes at a community college, Tarrant County Community College. And then I actually wanted to build a pipe fence at my house, so I decided to use my GI Bill and go transition into welding, and so I could put my own pipe fence up at the house. And so I got my associates in welding. Ended up with that, but I didn't expect to get into sales ever again. Uh, I reconnected with a childhood friend where I grew up here in Cleveland, and he'd been in real estate for about 15 years, primarily farm and ranch, but obviously we do residential and everything else. But that was his focus, and just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And we reconnected, and he said, "Man, go get your license." And I did that about 2 years ago, and I've been enjoying that and learning, and just my outdoors is my background, my passion, my underlying passion. So that kind of tied in well. And then recruiting, yes, it is very similar. Qualifying people, qualifying properties, making sure that their finances are in place. And so, yeah, it tied in real well.
So, what does, I guess, day in a life look like for a farm and ranch broker? Like, I know a few here, and they drive the big old trucks. They've got the 4x4, or the side by side, with a trailer behind them, so they go out there and drive everything. I mean, is that literally like day in the life for you, or is that just the flashy, fun stuff?
That's what you see on Instagram and YouTube. Yes, there's a lot of that. Primarily making just contact with people, creating relationships. So that's where a lot of the recruiting comes in. You think of a traditional farmer or rancher, it's kind of an old, gruff guy, a little rough around the edges. And those are very tight communities, and takes a lot of trust, in relationships. So they're not fast, flash in the pan type of opportunities. So a lot of times, going to different events. Luckily, we're close to the Fort Worth Stock Show area, so there's a lot of events up there. Just trying to connect with people in different communities in the cattle, even show animals, cutting, reining, roping. So just trying to be at a lot of different events, and being in that community. So you gotta build that trust and that relationship.
So, how do you? To me, that's always seemed the interesting thing with farm and ranch is getting into that community. So, how did you find getting into that community? Obviously, you kind of grew up there. You had family. I'm sure that helped a little bit, but to really grow that business, how did you actually get plugged into the community?
So a lot of times I'll go to cattle sales or horse sales, auctions, and actually just learning the knowledge of the lingo and what people. It's just observing a lot of times what they're driving, what trailers they're using, what equipment, what kind of animals they have, and a lot of just self-taught knowledge of research and reading. And I've got some friends that they have some cutting. They do cutting horse training, and so I'll go out and just watch and ask questions and try to just go, really just trying to strike up conversations with people and learn from them on what their story is and what they're doing.
Yeah, to me, the relationships in that side, an Instagram ad's not going to catch them, right? It's not the flashy social media stuff we see in the rest of real estate. I can recall a guy near a hunting lease I had. He was probably the preeminent land and ranch broker before he had passed, kind of in the central Texas area. And I mean, he showed up with coffee and donuts to the feed store every morning and sat there. And that literally, he had a little desk off to the side, and he apparently paid rent in the feed store. But he literally was there. So every guy that came in, hey, how's it going? What's going on with this? Hey, what you got? Oh, you guys are buying such and such. Oh, you got this going on. Chatted with them while they're waiting for to get checked out in the feed store. And, just everybody knew him. That was it. Everybody knew him. And as I try to get land deals out that way for some development stuff, I found I had to work with him because he's the only one that could get through to most of those property owners.
Well, and a lot of times it's knowing the gatekeeper. You can look up, just like any business or any high school, like in recruiting, you have to know who's who to talk to, who's open to conversation. Well, I wish I had that guy as a recruiter that posting up at the feed store. But yeah, it's just a lot of it is even just going out to dinner, going to consistently. So people want to see consistently your face, and you know, anytime you go somewhere new, people are going to wonder who's that guy or what's he doing. So that sometimes will strike up conversations that way.
So most of your real estate license training focused on residential, which you said you do some,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
for somebody that wanted to come in and go into farm and ranch sales,
Mhm.
what training, what are opportunities out there? What should they be looking for? I mean, because I could call myself a land broker and I sell land, but it's definitely not
Mhm.
with cattle or crop on.
Mhm.
How do you, I guess, what does that training pipeline start to look like? Or what is the best practice in training for somebody trying to get in?
I think that obviously getting with the right broker or team lead agency, I was very fortunate to get in with Greg Potts, who's my team lead at GS Realty team. And he's just got a vast knowledge and experience and different transactions. And um, just a lot of it is your own knowledge base of what you create and how much you put into research and knowing different things of soils and grasses and fertilizers. And a lot of these operations are the farm and ranch. They're commercial in some sense, so they have a lot of assets, a lot of liabilities, and knowing some of that business side of it is important.
Yeah, I would agree. And I know in my land side of my business, there's a lot of crossover where, um, I'll bring in one of our farm and ranch agents locally. If we come across something where, hey, they got cattle or they're in the middle of the growth season, but my developers want to buy now. What
Right.
do I need to do to walk through till the end of the growth season? What's the best way to set this up? Because I got chickens in the backyard, but I mean, that's the extent of what I'm doing, right? My wife won't let me move
Right.
out into the country like I'd like, but there's so many nuances that I think, the average real estate
Mhm.
agent gets himself in trouble with, which I'm sure you've seen, in
Mhm.
your side where the residential agent or even the commercial agent jumping out there trying to get in the middle of a farm and ranch contract. I mean, that's got to be disastrous.
Yeah, it's being comfortable. You think the environment of a farm and ranch operation and cattle or whatever it is, production wise, that those are dirty, hot, cold, uncomfortable careers, and a lot of it's self-sacrificing. So it takes a different person that enjoys being out in those different environments and things like that. So, um, these operations and businesses, they're 99% outside. So agents that are, there's got to be a comfort level with um, getting out into those environments. Um, we had a farm and ranch class that Greg put on last year, and we took several ATVs out and took some agents out, and just hearing the thought process, and people were happy just to be outside and looking at the properties. So I think it gives them a different perspective of you're looking at these multi family homes or a development or a subdivision, and it becomes very almost kind of cookie cutter somewhat. And that's what I like about the farm ranch is that it's different, and everybody operates different, and there's different terrains, different operations they're doing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's always what has intrigued me on the farm and ranch side, and always, if I could have started over, maybe that's where I would have gone.
Mhm.
Because to me that sounds fun going out there seeing it. Now I imagine you're on the road quite a bit as well. I mean, some of these farm
Mhm.
and ranch agents I know have a pretty wide geography
Mhm.
of where they're serving. Is that kind of what you've seen in your business as well?
Oh yeah, you're going to be behind the windshield. And that's very similar to recruiting. Yeah. uh, there a lot of these. There's probably I don't know. There's 60%. I was just doing some reading earlier, and this is probably one of the biggest generational changes in the next few years of land. And I know that people have listened and saw that, but um, getting out and just driving the roads in front of properties and looking up, doing research, finding out who the owners are, and trying to make a connection with them just to see where they're at. And some of these are generational farms or land. And, we've got a property here near Cleburne that there's, unfortunately people are, getting older and passing away. So you try to figure out, what the plan is or what the family's going to do with those properties. My goal is to keep things into ranch and land because I enjoy that. So many of these places are, a hayfield 2 years ago has got 20 homes on it now. So I enjoy trying to keep it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get it, and I think in general, not just land, but if you even look at businesses as well, we've seen that, especially with the baby boomer generation, as they're getting to the point of they're retiring, their children have no interest in running their business, running their farm, or any of that as well, which sets you up in a perfect position that there's going to be transactions. It's going to be out there, whether it's another operation nearby or next door, or if it's somebody that's going to come in as the hobby farmer and pick up, 10 acres or something like that and have the hobby farm. I mean, it's got to be vastly different working with both sets of clients, is it not?
Yes, it is. A lot of people, recently they're wanting to move out to some of the fringe areas of the DFW area, get 2 or 3 acres, maybe have some chickens, be close enough to be 30 or 40 minutes from work. And some of the people I'm talking to now, they're getting in their 50s, 60s retirement type of age, and um, um, they're wanting to transition to that. Some of these people have never lived or been in the country, and it's different.
Mhm.
Your commutes are a little different, and but yeah, it's different working with a farm and ranch buyer or seller than a residential. Just their perspectives are different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to talk about your transition a little bit. So you were leaving the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
You had obviously the transition assistance program and those kind of things that were there. Was there anything that you thought was great that you got out of that program, or you thought was just completely just malarkey or sounded great at the time and then came out to be absolutely worthless for you?
Um, Honestly, one of the best things I found in transitioning that I was, and anybody that's entrepreneurial minded, and a lot of military people are, hey, I'd like to do this different or change this or create something. And I went through American Corporate Partners, which was an
Hmm.
amazing program, and ACP. And I did that for the last year I was in the Marine Corps. And when I was in New York City, it was a great opportunity to kind of network and meet some people that are in the veterans community because it's a large city, but it gets small real quick. And I got connected with this American Corporate Partners, and it was almost like a matchmaking service. They matched you with a somebody that's in the C-suite or they're got their own companies or businesses, and they mentor you for a year, building resumes and um, coming up with ideas and business plans. That was a great tool just to get your mind thinking in that process of, okay, I'm going to be in a different spot next year or in 9 months. And that was one of the best resources I had experienced. When I left the Marine Corps and moved back to close to my hometown, I had a general idea that I was just going to be Mr. Mom, and I have 4 daughters and a 3-year-old grandson now. And at that time, my daughters were still in junior high school, so I was going to be Mr. Mom, and I actually got on the booster club, sports booster club, and that. So I was going to kind of back off and take it easy for a little bit, at least kind of decompress from the recruiting world because it's a beast, but it's enjoyable. But yeah, the program wise, I didn't really use a lot. I found out that the community college is a great resource to kind of get your feet wet into college if you're going to, and everybody should use the post 9/11 or any of their. That's part of the reason I moved back to Texas is my Texas Hazelwood Act and benefits for my kids and myself. Uh, so program wise, I talked to a couple of veterans. I knew people that had already been, retired or have got out of the military. So there wasn't a lot of programs I used. That American Corporate Partners just got my mind going in that right direction of what I kind of wanted to possibly do. I felt like I was 18 again and didn't really know what I wanted to do at 45.
I,
So
your story resonates because that's so many times we hear that same story is,
mhm,
oh my God, I got to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I was going to be an airman, a soldier, a Marine, a
mhm,
sailor, whatever the case happened to be.
mhm,
Um, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, it's over. I can go contract, or I can go kind of do the same stuff I'm doing now, where some people are like, done with it. I don't want to touch an aircraft, or nobody's going
mhm,
to hire me to fix tanks as a civilian, right?
mhm,
Things vastly change, and trying to figure out
mhm.
what you're going to be when you grow up. Was there,
Yeah.
when you're kind of going through that, what do I want to be when I grow up after you got out? I
Mhm.
mean, you thought about hobby farming, you did welding. I mean, what was it with real estate that you eventually ended up there and kind of drew you to it?
Um, I think seeing the opportunity to have some autonomy and some control over what I did and what my uh, there's some danger to that, but at the same time, it was opportunity to still be productive and still I have really enjoyed with recruiting is just the relationships and the networking and hearing people's stories and seeing transitions in their life or changes, and then um, the real estate aspect. Um, with being in the farm and ranch, it's not fast. It's not those are not typically real quick opportunities or deals. So your residential, you got to balance that out. Um, and I think that opportunity to still kind of have some of the recruiting side of things, the business side, but also be in a productive environment to where I can, produce some income.
So, what does it look like, I guess, in the farm and ranch world to start building up that business? I know as I coach new agents in commercial, we tell them you're going to prospect for the first 6 months and make
Mhm,
nothing. In the second
mhm,
6 months, maybe you'll close a deal or two, but you're basically going to make nothing that first year. And that
mhm,
second year, maybe you start picking up a little bit by there. But the
mhm,
goal is to get you to year two. And then to year
mhm,
five, you should be set and solid. What does
mhm.
that look like in farm and ranch? Is that similar, or is it a
Yeah, it's building those relationships and those connections. Um, and I've been talking to one lady down near your area. I've been talking to her for almost 2 years for horse property. Um, so it takes a lot of time just connecting with those people. Obviously, if you're staying in the residential arena, um, the more you're out there talking to people, meeting people, going to events, it just takes time to build that. And yes, your first year is going to be the challenging, and coming into the second year, and still the environment, your economic environment and your market also dictates a lot of friends are like, why are you getting into real estate right now? It's terrible, it's the worst. And I was like, hey, at least there's going to be some opportunity coming up. um, we'll see how the rest of the year plays out.
And I think what works well for veterans, especially coming into a non W 2, non reoccurring
Mhm,
paycheck, is many of us either get out, in your case, retired and have retirement. So
mhm,
at least you have
mhm,
some income, or
mhm,
many come out and do the VA disability where,
mhm,
if you're 100%, that's,
mhm,
4 grand or so a month. I mean, you're
mhm,
not going to get,
mhm,
rich off of that, but at least
mhm,
keep food on the table and a roof over your head. I think it's one of the
mhm.
advantages that many military come in and looking at real estate as a second career is there is a bit of stability because you do have some type of paycheck coming in. Obviously,
Right.
retired much better than not, but I think
Mhm, mhm.
that's a strong suit that many shy away from, especially as you move into the irregular income. How have you and your family kind of adjusted to that irregular income?
Well, I'm I'm an empty nester now, so that is a little bit different of not
Helps.
having your children. It limits your output, so to speak.
Hmm.
uh, so I think that the um, the transition and the income, yes, retired disability is a great support. if you're, a 4-year, I met an Air Force airman that's out in Abilene, and he's started his own podcast. He's getting into the investment side. He was very proactive. He's still in the military. He's still got a couple years left. So I think that people that are either in that first 4 years, obviously some people that are in their second contract, things like that, they are trying to figure out what they're going to do when they exit, if they're going to go to college. I think college is the best route because you're going to get that support for the GI Bill, and if you're, got some Hazelwood or other benefits, Texas. Really, it's just having that stability and security is challenging.
I would agree. And I mean, I came out, and honestly, my plan was to get out, get my degree, come back, get commissioned as an officer. And then I realized I didn't have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to BT. And, life was a little bit more fun, I guess, out of the military. And then I realized what you could actually earn, and in the civilian side. And it made a lot more sense. So maybe I'll stick around on the civilian side for a little while through there. But I agree. I think college is good for many because it gives you kind of a place to fail safely.
Right.
You're kind of just learning. Most professors care, and I'm a college professor as well. Most care. Most want to see you successful. There's not many because you bring in, if you're, 25 or 45, you bring in a very different experience than the average 18, 19-year-old in class, which I don't know. As a professor, I haven't had one yet, but I could definitely imagine the complexity or the interest that it would bring in differently to the classroom.
Yeah. Well, I think if somebody's got the opportunity to get their licensing towards the end of their military career, if you networking and connecting with brokers and agencies is a big part of how you're dating those companies to try to figure out which one fits best for you. I chose the boutique style agency just because it was a little bit more intimate, and learning was occurring more than in a big box real estate agency, I felt. So, and then I knew who I was going to be working with already. So it's just like any company or business you're going to go to, you got to figure out what fits. And the nice thing is that one of the things I noticed when I got out of the military or the Marine Corps is that I have a lot more control now than I did before of, I don't like it here. I can move. I can pick up a different career. I mean, that was a big thing. And I knew that getting out, but just actually experience is like, wait, I'm not on leave. I'm actually can go move somewhere else or start a different career. So that to me is some people that I ran into when I was taking just welding classes. I had a couple different Marines and a couple Army that were taking classes, and I really finding your group, your little tribe when you get out is a big thing. When you exit the military, I got into a veterans kayak group, so I do that once a month, and hunting groups, or I'm also got into ham radio, so there's a lot of veterans into that. So it's just you kind of explore what your wants are and what you've always thought about doing, and take that chance and learn.
How did you go about finding that tribe, though? Because I think that's one of the things that I know I experienced, and I was listening to you, I'm assuming you kind of experienced as well, is that you go from serving with people and there's trust and there's purpose, and then suddenly it's about you, which is a weird transition to begin with. And then you don't have that same support system. So how did you go about finding kind of that tribe for you? Or was you just kind of lucky they were all in school at the same time?
Well, the outside of the classroom or the welding class I was taking, I love fishing, I love hunting, I love outdoors. So I just jump on the internet, jump on YouTube, and there's tons of veterans groups now that are in those different areas. I mean, you can go online to Meetup, and if you like riding bikes or paddleboarding or painting or whatever it is, you can find your group. You just got to be proactive and do it. So that's what I just started exploring different things and finding my groups that I'm interested in. So.
Okay. And do those turn into more professional relationships? Are those just more personal, or have you kind of found that you have personal tribes and professional tribes? Or
Yes, I have. Getting in the real estate area, the arena, just getting into those organizations or associations, um, and networking in that way, because there's a lot of military that get into some aspect of real estate, and your inspectors, your appraisers, your roofers, your window guys, your pool guys, landscaping. So there's military in a lot of those different areas. You just got to be proactive and just keep meeting people and finding them. Um, I found that once you say that you served, and they're going to say, oh, well, I know a guy. Everybody knows a guy. And so they'll, hey, you should talk to Joe. He was in the Air Force for 20 years or 10 years, or the Army, and he does this. So putting yourself out there, get to the coffee shop, get to the restaurant, um, get to the associations. I think guys that I had seen that were younger, were a little bit more hesitant of putting themselves out there and finding those things. So they kind of needed some coaching of, you can either stay, and it was very similar to recruiting. You can either stay where you're at doing what you're doing, or, take that next chance, get on that high dive and just take 2 or 3 classes at the community college, or go to your big school, or go to your specialized school. I got a buddy Marine buddy that he recruits now for a technical college, and he recruits military that are exiting and helps them get into, technical colleges. So it really just, you have to be proactive. It could be very easy to become reclusive, depends on your circumstance of pulling back. And I've noticed some younger people, I guess it's just maturity or experience, that was their first 4 years of life outside of high school and away from their parents. And then they get out and they still don't have necessarily their dream or what they want to do. So really just, I think that's one thing the military could do better on the exit of the military is the organizations, and helping the veterans transition into a group that they can feel a part of, your mentorship.
I would agree, and again, that's part of the reason why we built this community. We're trying to build this community right here. Was we're all having the same struggles. We're all sharing the same journey. It's all similar, and that was ultimately the goal that we wanted to build with this. Was, eventually have something that if I wanted to figure out how to do farm and ranch, now I can go call you and say, hey, what do I need to do? How can I walk through this? Or if I want to do commercial, or if I want to do residential or lending, or whatever the case happens to be, or the same genre as, hey, I need a referral for a farm and ranch agent in North Texas. Now I know who to call, right? And that was ultimately what we wanted to try to build, was this kind of, this kind of network and tribe that we can sit down and grow. And the nice thing I will say with some of the larger brokerages is they're building that internally to their brokerage as well. And that's one of the things we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, is that many of these larger brokerages have started to build that. There are downsides to the larger brokers. I've been with them too. There's some downsides to some of the larger brokers where you could just be a number in a system, where at the boutique firms, you're absolutely right. You have much more personalization and all that as well, which, sounds like you really weighed those opportunities, of what you wanted. As you were kind of looking for the brokerage, I mean, short of knowing who you're going to be with, was there anything else that you specifically were looking for, or maybe in hindsight wish you're still with the same brokerage, or maybe not hindsight what you wish you'd have done differently? But we don't want to get you in trouble. But I mean, is there anything that you would have advised differently, or looking at Gunny, who's getting ready to get out, would you advise Gunny differently now that Casey knows what's happening?
Right. No, I enjoy the path that I've taken. The the team that I'm with is, I mean, it becomes a life team, not necessarily just real estate. So you really got to shop and find your, and that's the nice thing is that you are your own business and you don't have to stay where you're at. So it might take exploring a couple different agencies or brokerages to be with. Ask a lot of questions, do your research. Talking to the people that are on the peripheral of an agency. I mean, you talk to your inspectors, talk to your roofers, talk to your lenders, and so the bottlenecks that you're lending in title, so they can actually give you a lot of feedback on what they see because everything comes across their desk. So look at the pinch points of where that's at and try to explore because they got to work with those brokerages as well, so they can give you some good feedback.
I like that advice. I like it for several reasons. What I'll say from being a broker, we put a lot of time, energy, effort into recruiting and making sure that we look pretty and we're, everything's there, but you're not going to see the ugly because we're going to do a good job of hiding the ugly. We're going to do a good job of hiding everything. I mean, of course we don't have ugly, but
right.
You know what I mean? Like we're going to do that, but that title company who's seen the last 16 transactions come across their desk may have a completely different opinion. Wow, those agents aren't trained well, or those agents are trained really, really well. I like that because I think a lot of times we think go talk to the brokerage, interview that brokerage, but I like what you bring up, that talking to the title, talking to the home inspector, talking to the lenders and seeing who they like to work with, what brokerage they see work well. I think that's invaluable advice that honestly we haven't heard yet on all this.
Well, I always working with different high schools and recruiting in colleges. Everywhere's got their own environment. Each one of them has their own little world. And I don't know where I heard it or thought about it, but you always need to know the janitor because the janitor knows everything that's going on. They know all the people. It's not always knowing somebody that's running the ship. It's the people that are in support of them that can educate you a little bit more and be a little bit more transparent and open about the environment where they're at.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's perfect. Perfect advice is know the janitor, know who to reach out to, know who literally has the dirt on everybody, right? You definitely know what's going on. So and as we're wrapping everything up, I mean, kind of asked part of the question, but just in general, looking at everything that as you started that transition, is there anything that you would have done differently or in hindsight wish you could have taken this step or that step differently than what you've done so far?
From my perspective of being retired and having some support, I think that the only thing I would have done differently is get more with that camaraderie and finding your people that have a like mind or similar goals and that we're military, and be open because I know some people that get out of the military and they're closed. They don't want anything to do with the military. They don't want to touch or talk to anything, that maybe I've gotten burned and they just want to be done. Those people seem to flounder a little bit more when they transition. Some people go down a rough road when they get out. They lose that support. So I think for me, I wouldn't do a lot different. I would get more involved, volunteering. I found that volunteering with groups or organizations, it lets you know what's going on behind the scenes. That's what I would have probably done a little bit more different, is just get involved in more groups and organizations, veterans groups or just community groups.
No, that's great advice and definitely